Happy birthday, America, with hope. Happy birthday, America. I'm sorry the weather isn't nicer. The sun is shining all right, but the moral climate dampens my spirits. Maybe it's the wetness of my eyes, but the 200 candles on your cake don't seem to be shining as brightly as they should. For many years, your candles were a light unto the nations, to the oppressed of the earth. Going to America was like going to heaven. Regretfully, my dear Americans, I am sad on your happy birthday. You are our home, and we are your family. I hate to spoil your party, but as one of your sons, I feel I must speak up. Let's face it, our country is beginning to look more and more like a broken home. We are in the midst of a loud family quarrel, and the neighbors are listening and watching too, via Telstar. We've run into problems, Mom. Let's talk them over before our anxiety turns into shame. The great American dream of the democratic salvation of the common man, the transformation of the plebeian peasants into partition prophets of freedom, has not quite come true. The dream is still miraculously alive and radiant, despite the fierce confrontation with some of the recent national nightmares. I sometimes wonder whether we are not morally ahead 200 years ago. The hazardous expeditions of the pioneers across deserts, forests, mountain ranges, established settlements which became towns, then cities for free men and women to live in. But we are now afraid to walk the paved streets of those cities. We are afraid in our homes and schools, afraid of rape, robbery, and interracial violence, afraid to breathe the polluted air of progress. We are even afraid of the very men we democratically elected to govern and protect us. Political high fidelity has replaced integrity as they speak out of both sides of their mouths. What shall we teach our children? I pledge allegiance to men who don't honor their pledge. We are torn between devotion to our country and suspicion of our government. Neither our leaders nor we, the people, seem to have any great goal in common. Sorry, America. 200 million individuals, each in business for himself, does not constitute a nation. E pluribus unum, out of many one, is imprinted not on our hearts, but on our currency. Take the American flag, for example, which through the years of the nation's growth added a star, nations with glowing pride. It now finds itself under the guise of patriotism, sliced up into patches for dungarees, shaped into sneakers, bikinis, bicycle seats, sweaty socks, underwear, shopping bags, party hats, yes, even on babies' potty seats. Old glory has been cut down and redesigned for the greater glory of greed. The prophets are profiteering. Liberty guarantees a man the right to renounce the flag if he chooses. But I question this moral right to sell it piecemeal for pieces of silver. There are other dreams that aren't doing too well. Today, official birthday, greetings will arrive from the ignited nations of the world, gathered in solemn conclave at the UN building, the Tower of Babel with windows. They will cease flexing their missiles long enough to vote diplomatic congratulations with absentations to their favorite foe. Be it resolved that whereas, yada, yada, yada. We must endeavor to become once again an inspiration to the world, rather than a disciplinarian. The UN sessions remind me of our secret war games as kids in the pre-fashioned east side of Manhattan. Children playing like soldiers are hardly distinguishable for soldiers playing like children. In essence, they contain all the political of the mutual distrust and power which the adult councils of peace lead to war or to the brink of it. Accusation. Where's my bike? Denial. I ain't got your bike. Reliable sources. Oh no? Louis said you took it. Accusation. Where's my bike? Denial. I ain't got your bike. Diplomatic insult. Your fat mustache. Whew. Since mustaches in certain cultures are a symbol of machoism, this slur upon one's father's mustache has all kinds of nasty sexual implications. Ultimatum. I want my bike back in 10 minutes or I feel sorry for you. Mobilization. I'll call my brother's gang and they'll kill you. Secret weapon. I've got an uncle who is stronger than your brother. They were just waiting for him to say this so that they might get an idea of his real military strength. Losing face. I'll let you go this time. It's obvious by now that he hasn't got an uncle. That's all they wanted to know. You see, they don't have uncles either. But as long as he doesn't know it, they're safe. Diplomatic victory. See that, fellers? Just a yellow belly. Session adjourned until Monday. So, America, soon the birthday party will be over. But how do we make it to the third centennial? Uncle Sam's great-great-great-nephew/citizen, Sam Levinson, has a few humble suggestions. We must endeavor to become once again an inspiration to the world rather than its disciplinarian. Our need is not to be merely larger and stronger than all other nations, but nobler. The best defense of our country is to keep it at all times worth defending. We do not have to catch up with anybody but our founding fathers. Progress can be made by looking back as well as ahead. We need not to destroy all competing social systems. We have but to surpass them. Democracy will work if the people's will. All who can must work. And there must be work for all who can. The most dangerous thing in the world to do is nothing. Compulsory idleness runs a very close second to slavery and like slavery. It ultimately leads to violence, and time to kill may mean just that. Let no one force us to choose between the political left or the right. There are all other alternatives, moral ones, like higher and lower, justice and injustice, construction and destruction, peace and violence, kindness and cruelty, hatred and love. If we don't call our fellow man brother, others will come along and call him comrade. Let us not fear the word collective. It is not an alien or subversive. The United States is a collective noun. The dream we live by, the one marked Made in America, is a collective dream, which has been sustained by the minds and hands of many people. Some came in slaves, ships. Others paid their way across. It all belongs to us. Now it's time for the ceremony. Gather round, freedom fighters, freedom lighters. Get ready. Get set. But not too hard. We don't want to blow down the cake. It took 200 years to make it. And we must save enough of the stuff that dreams are made of for generations yet to come. We must also leave the recipe. First, wash your hands of old world prejudices. Get a bowl large enough to hold the great plans of the most ambitious of men, as well as the gentle hopes of the meek. You don't need expensive ingredients. It's the leavening of love. Please, no artificial coloring, flavors, or preservatives. Put in all that makes life sweet. Unbleached freedom, unadulterated justice, unalloyed equality. Water liberally with tears of gratitude and mix vigorously with your bare hands. A little oil of perspiration blends the parts. Top it with the sweet fruits of the labor of honest men, and bake slowly over the flame of liberty. Kept aglow for all of us by our ancestors. If handled carefully, you will have enough to feed not only your family, but the entire family of man, who hunger not for bread alone, but for the chance to break bread with their fellow man. By Sam Levinson, Field Enterprises, Incorporated, July 4th, 1976. Published in the Mercury News under the Living section. The Declaration is what the celebration is all about. 200 years ago this week, on July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted a resolution making this an independent nation. 2 days later, the Declaration of Independence proclaimed the right of America to be free and become a guide for all men through the ages. On the 4th day of July in 1776, the American dream came true. The Declaration of Independence embodied years of struggle and experiment, of testing new ground and building upon it, of proving what other men only pondered. The lesson of government had started with little groups of adventurers and refugees huddled on hostile beaches, forming associations to stay alive. The community of man had developed behind log stockades, and in the starving times when everyone would have died if the well had not tended to the sick, the strong carried the weak, the whole fed the hungry. Self-made Americans learned that freedom to pursue happiness was half the race. The joy of a free mind came to religious refugees worshiping for the first time without fear. And the natural God-given right to freedom was embedded in a people who had crossed an ocean to seek it and then found it in a land too big to be bound. On July 4th, 1776, 200 years ago today, and over a century and a half after the first Englishmen settled in the New World, the Continental Congress drew all these elements of America into a single code for the first time. Detractors would say there was nothing at all that new about it. They would argue that the philosophies originated with Locke in England, or Voltaire in France, or Calvin in Switzerland, or Sophocles in ancient Greece. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote it, said he never intended to be original. On the contrary, he was trying to capture the truth which America knew and wanted to share, an expression of the American mind. Ezra Stiles, the Revolutionary Era president of Yale, agreed that it captured the soul of the content of the entire continent. For in all history, these ideas had been tried and proven only in America. Only an American in that day and age could report the results with the sure knowledge and hold it up as a beacon to the world. The Declaration of Independence did not make America free. Americans did that in 7 years of bloody, bloody war. It did not make them independent. Congress had done that with the adoption of a resolution 2 days earlier. What it did was declare for all time the right of the people to be free. Not just Americans, but all people. It proclaimed independence, not of just a country, but of humanity, through the right of the people to govern themselves as they wished. The founding fathers were revolutionaries, but they were not mindless radicals. They wrote declarations of independence out of a decent respect to the opinions of mankind.
They knew they were forcefully overthrowing a government and believed deeply that the governments long established should be changed for light and transient causes. So they gave their reasons and hopefully their justification. They had suffered long. Americans declared things free men should not have to endure. Although their complaints all sprang from particular offenses, Jefferson couched them in broader terms, which still state just what it is Americans will not put up with. His indictment was directed at the king as head of state. George III was perhaps not quite the reprehensible character he appears, but in today's reading, as is in Jefferson's, he stands for government, the kind which still cannot be tolerated. The king was accused specifically of frustrating self-government, justice, and the fundamental rights of his American subjects. He had vetoed or obstructed their laws and had refused to pass laws they needed. Furthermore, the British had made it difficult for colonial legislators to function. When they offended royal authority, they were dissolved, and the colonies were left for long periods with no representatives for government. Americans were willing to abide dutifully by properly enacting law, but they resented the stationing of army in their midst in peacetime to enforce laws not of their making. And they were angered by efforts to render the military independent and superior to the civil power. But the greatest fear was that the fundamental rights of free people, Britain, they charged, had conspired to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution. The mother country had been guilty of cutting off our trade, imposing taxes on us without our consent, depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of trial by jury. The final stroke was the use of military force against Americans and their rights. He has plundered our seas, the king was accused, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. And this bit of history sounds dated. The American resentment has no less great from the bombing of Pearl Harbor than the shelling of Falmouth or the burning of Norfolk. These were not just idle irritants. The Americans were convinced they were part of a concerted design for the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Jefferson wrote, "Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. The right to petition with peaceful bounds remains a critical tool of democracy. But of what use is it if no one listens because government is not responsible to the people?" This is what our forefathers believed, and generations of descendants have defended and expanded that belief. They did not have to accept such mistreatment, and Jefferson explained why. There was a higher authority than king or parliament, he said, the laws of nature and nature's God. We hold these truths to be self-evident, the newly United States of America said, that all men are created equal, that no man or clique of men have the right to a greater share than others of the protection and opportunities of God's law, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the fundamentals of human freedom and the just object of human government. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men as servants of a common good and felicity, keepers of order and securers of rights, not masters serving their own ends, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Government based on the willingness of the people to live together in harmony and mutual security. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall see most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Government, they said, must serve its divine purpose or lose its right to govern. The ultimate right lay with the people as a gift of Providence. And calling on this supreme judge of the world, and in the name of the good people of the colonies, these colonies, they declared their old government abolished and began anew. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. As freedom among humankind must always be, this declaration was not complete. It did not explain just who the people were, who could raise and tumble governments, or how they should do it short of war. Having once justified violent overthrow of their government, however, the founding fathers would move in another decade to assure that it would never be necessary again. They would devise a government which the voters could overturn at the polls instead on the battlefield, and a constitution which could be amended by citizens, not armies. The founders knew that as long as mortals ruled the earth, there would always to be some form of tyranny. But they concluded that the tyranny of the majority and a democracy was the best that could be hoped for. And even this could be restrained from use by a firm constitution with a guarantee of the fundamental rights of citizenship set forth by the Declaration of Independence. Jefferson would have liked for his declaration to go further. He had wanted the people of Britain not just their leaders to be held accountable for the grief visited upon America. For political reasons, this was stricken from his draft, and America still wrestles with the proposition that the people should be answerable for their actions of their government as government is to the people. Jefferson also included a denunciation of slavery. It was stricken for the sake of a united front of northern and southern colonies. Black Americans would not begin to enjoy their natural rights for 89 more years. Women would be able to participate in democratic revolutions at the ballot box for another 144 years. The youths of 18 old enough to fight for freedom couldn't vote for it for another 195 years. But the fundamentals had been established, the direction set, and Jefferson felt it would continue as long as people cared to be free. The Declaration of Independence, he predicted, would be to some parts sooner, to others later, but finally to all, the signal of arousing men to burst the chains of autocratic government. That form which we have substituted restores free right to the unbounded exercise of reason and freedom of opinion, he said. All eyes were opened or opening to the rights of man.